This is Team Brazil's presentation, presented by Jessica Lopez, Sierra Robinson, Elena McPeak, Brian Marshall, and Jamie Jameson Tancrow.
During this presentation, we'll be talking about the demographic indicators, cultural differences between Brazil and the United States, employment law differences between Brazil and the United States, the human resources management differences, perform a SWOT analysis, offer our recommendations for opening a facility in Brazil, and much more.
There were 5 key demographic indicators of Brazil that were chosen. The demographics, population, education, income, human security, and the employment, all 5 key demographic indicators in which an HR practitioner must understand. The population of Brazil is roughly 202 million people. Of that, 15.7 million are 65 or older, and 14.7 million are under the age of 5. Most of the population is in the urban cities at 85.4 million. The primary language of Brazil is Portuguese, and the religion practiced is Christianity with a basis in the Roman Catholic Church. Education being the second key demographic, as there is only 15.2 years of expected education in Brazil adults, with a mean schooling years of 7.7 years. The adult literacy rate is 91.3% overall, as the Brazil school dropout rate is 19.4%. However, 53.6% have some secondary education, as the government spends approximately 5.8% of the GDP on public education, although class sizes are relatively small at 20.5 students per teacher. Education is important, yet not considered important in Brazil. The income of Brazil reflects their economy. Strong in agriculture, mining, and manufacturing, as well as service sectors. The third of the gross national income is $15,175 per capita. The external debt is at 21.9% of the GNI, and they have a gross domestic product per capita in the total of $2,916 billion. For an organization expanding into Brazil, it is very important to understand the human security within that country. Human security is important as the company may provide some expatriates. The homicide rate per 100,000 people is 25.2%. Of the 202 million, 93% of the children under 5 are registered at birth. Homeless people due to natural disasters is on average per million people 52.8%. Old age pension is around 86.3%, and the prison population is 274 per 100,000 people. The refugee rate is low, around 1,000 people a year, and the suicide rate per female is 2.5%. However, per male is 9.4%, and the violence against women is roughly around 38.8% overall. Employment is also another factor to consider as an HR practitioner expanding into Brazil. The employment, work, and vulnerability is important for human resource management, as roughly ages 15 and older, only 65.6% of the population is employed. Things to consider is child labor. It stands at 8.3%. And long-term unemployment rate is at 9.8%, but the total unemployment rate is around 6.7%. The labor force participation rate in ages 15 and older is 69.8%. Keeping in mind, mandatory maternity leave for females is 120 days in every organization. Some of the implications for human resource management are right within the demographics of Brazil. Not many of the population has received university education, and the income is low, and the child labor is still in practice. Human security is essentially a factor, as expatriates will need to be educated on Brazilian laws and safety. In regards to employment, the long-term unemployment rate is high. However, the total unemployment rate is relatively stable. Because females make up 59.4% of the labor force, it is important to keep in mind the mandatory 120 paid maternity leave days that are required. In addition, an HR practitioner should be mindful of Brasilia has not taken full advantage of its large working age population to develop its human capital and strengthen its social and economic institutions, but is funding a study abroad program to bring advanced skills back into the country. The current favorable age structure will begin to shift around 2025, with the labor force shrinking and the elderly starting to compose an increasingly share of the total population, as stated by the World Factbook.
In discussing the cultural differences, we will be addressing the dimensions of independence versus interdependence, uncertainty avoidance, long-term orientation, indulgence, and power distance. As you can see from the graph at a first glance, the two countries are quite different, but look at the next slides and you will understand a little more about the cultural differences and the implications for human resource management. One cultural dimension used in SHRM's GlobeSmart profile is independence versus interdependence. Hofstede in 2016 describes this dimension as whether people's self-image is defined as I or we. This dimension focuses on how the different values approach identity. People from cultures that are more independent focus on individuals' identity and personal achievement. Cultures that are more interdependent appreciate group harmony and cooperation. GlobeSmart 2016. This culture is focused on the we. In Brazil, people from birth onwards are integrated into strong cohesive groups made up of extended family. These familial bonds extend to the workplace where older, more established family members are expected to aid younger family members in finding a job. Moreover, in Brazil, it is important to build relationships with others. Uncertainty avoidance is how the society deals with the fact that the future is unknown, making the decision of how much of it should they try to control or simply let it happen. The extent to which members of a culture feel threatened by ambiguous or unknown situations and have created beliefs and institutions that try to avoid these is reflected in the score of uncertainty avoidance. Frigens, Gilbert, Leonard, and Turani Rad in 2013 state that uncertainty avoidance is a cultural trait strongly associated with risk tolerance. Even if risk tolerance is an individual trait, individuals have the tendency to conform to the dominant values and behavior of the group, making it a cultural characteristic. Long-term orientation refers to how a society has to maintain some links with its own past while dealing with the challenges of the present and future. In this aspect, a low score, such as the United States, suggests a culture that prefers to maintain traditions and norms and treating change with suspicion. In Brazil, on the other hand, people are more encouraging in education and preparation for the future. Indulgence is the cultural dimension which describes the amount of control people have over their impulses and desires. Both countries scored somewhat similar in this dimension, with the United States having a slightly higher score. This indicates that the United States culture has a higher degree of indulgence compared to Brazil. Both societies are considered to be indulgent rather than restrained, indicating that people have a positive attitude, higher levels of optimism, and value leisure time. Power distance is defined as the extent to which the less powerful members of institutions and organizations within a country expect and accept that power is distributed unequally. The assessment indicates that Brazil values hierarchical organization structures, where the people in higher positions have more benefits than the less powerful, and status and positions become important. This also reflects in the family structure, where there is higher respect for the elderly than it is in the United States. Understanding the differences and similarities between the two cultures helps the human resource professionals and business owners create meaningful relationships with Brazil organizations. Understanding Brazil's willingness to take risks helps U.S. organizations present their offers in a manner that provides the sense of security, presenting facts and forecasts. The fact that Brazil's long-term orientation is more open to change than the United States is an advantage in balancing their uncertainty avoidance dimension. Indulgence can be used when creating relationships by engaging in off-duty activities together, creating partnerships, but also understanding the Brazilian employees' values and preferred activities. By offering a benefits package that supports indulgence, U.S. organizations can become competitive in the Brazilian market. This dimension is also facilitated by Brazil's interdependence trait, where relationships are important. Power distance is important in structuring organizations to respect hierarchies, as well as understanding everyone's roles in a Brazilian organization when trying to collaborate.
Next, we will be talking about employment law differences. And in that, we will be talking more specifically about benefit administration, minimum wage and single fixed contracts, mandatory insurances and Social Security, maternity leave and pregnancy discrimination, and the HRM implications of the employment law differences. So one of the biggest differences in employment law between Brazil and the United States is benefit administration. Brazil is highly regulated by national legislation, while in the U.S., most contracts between employers and employees are at will. This means that in Brazil, benefits and workers' rights are determined by the government, and organizations are simply required to provide a good predetermined standard for living for all employees. And there wasn't a lot of clarity on what exactly this meant. However, we did notice that an acceptable wage is one of those. Also, in the U.S., organizations are given more authority to define what benefits it will offer and to what extent. This really plays into the fact that the United States comes from a very competitive business environment where benefits are used to attract and retain employees as a strategy. And another example is in the U.S., paid vacation is not mandatory. But in Brazil, employees have the right to 30 calendar days of vacation per year, so long as they have less than 5 unjustified absent days in 12 months of work. Another significant employment law difference lies in minimum wage and single fixed term contracts between Brazil and the United States. According to the World Bank Group, employees in a large city like Rio de Janeiro are entitled to earn at least 419 USD per month when its currency is exchanged. Also, a fixed-term contract is limited to 24 months. This is very different than the United States because employees in an equally large city like Los Angeles are entitled to earn 1688 USD per month. That's significantly higher than what it is in Brazil. Additionally, there's no maximum length for a single fixed-term contract. A third difference that's seen in employment law between Brazil and the United States is the mandatory insurances and Social Security setup. So basically, in the United States, the Social Security Administration provides different advantages to worker, and this can be anything from retirement benefits, disability benefits, and also in cases of families' debts or employee debts. Some of the contributions and benefits are required by federal law, such as workers' compensation and Social Security tax, but others are discretionary, such as health insurance, and this means that an employee can choose to contribute or an employer can choose to contribute. In Brazil, the opposite is a little bit true. The INSS is responsible for Social Security and gives various benefits to Brazilian workers so long as the employers or themselves, in the case of the autonomous worker, pay the contribution. This contribution and benefit, it's not required by law as in the United States, but if an individual is employed and is paying the INSS contribution, then they will have access to the benefits offered. Lastly, there's a very big difference in employment law matters when it comes to maternity leave and pregnancy discrimination. In the United States, there's no explicit law on how to offer maternity leave. However, federal regulation in the U.S. does provide some sort of guidance and rules on this matter. First, the Family and Medical Leave Act establishes eligibility